Tracy has been a member of the Windsor Police Service 911 Communication Center for over 20 years. Currently a 911 supervisor, she is a communication center project lead for radio systems upgrades and interoperability projects in Windsor and Michigan agencies. With no further ado, I'd like to please ask Tracy to come forward. Okay, so we're just going to see if we can get the presentation rolling.
No, that's not it.
Good. If not, I can
I have a list of files, but I don't have your file open.
I didn't know Carlo worked for the communications.
So do you want me, I can just share it and I'll just
Sure.
just 1 second. Sorry, everyone.
No worries.
No worries.
We do this every week, Tracy. So
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Well, I'm gonna talk a little bit while this is going on. So when we were introducing Tracy, we also have Lori. Lori is retired from the 911 center and she's actually the one who trained Tracy. So she have a little bit of knowledge on this.
Yeah,
too.
no
Besides
pressure.
being a friend. She's just here to supervise.
So good morning, everyone. I'm not going to be able to see my notes, so hopefully I don't forget anything that I wanted to talk about. Next generation 911 is up and coming. So that's what NG 911 represents. I just want to make sure I can switch to my next slide. So you already know about me. No more there. So Windsor Police Service, we run the primary PSAP for Windsor and Amherstburg. What is a primary PSAP? So PSAP stands for Public Safety Answering Point. Primary meaning that all 911 calls come to us for the town of Amherstburg and the city of Windsor. Everyone else, so right now we're in Tecumseh. So if we were to dial 911 from here, it goes to North Bay OPP. And then because OPP polices this area, so then they'll transfer it to North Bay OPP. Yeah, so for LaSalle, Kingsville, Leamington, Lakeshore, Tecumseh, Essex, all 911 calls go to North Bay OPP first. They decide where it's going to be routed to, and then they send it to local fire and ambulance. Just so you know, in Windsor, for Windsor and Amherstburg, everything comes to us and stays with us. A little bit easier. So about us, we have 36 full-time communicators, 5 supervisors. I'm one of those. And we have a complement of part-time people, pardon me, as well, because they fill in the gaps. So vacations, sick calls, things like that. We are considered a medium-sized 911 center. Last year, we received over 300,000 calls. Those are just the incoming calls. I don't know if that's increased a little bit since you were with us. 911 calls, 113,000 calls for the city of Windsor, 2,500 for the town of Amherstburg. And non-emergency calls, as you can see, are here. So something to think about when you want to break that down. It's about a call every 30 seconds. If you wanted to quantify that. Mind you, we don't get a call every 30 seconds. We get clusters of calls and things like that.
You're open 24/7.
24/7, 365. We're never not there. Good question. So what is 911? We're the number that connects you to any emergency service. How did 911 come about? It came about as a simplified number that made it easy for people in all areas to dial for help, as opposed to having a 10-digit number to call in every municipality. So if you're traveling and you leave Windsor, you're not going to know what the phone number to call in Chatham is for 10-digit dialing, but you know what 911 is. If you're traveling abroad, 911 is not necessarily the same number. In Europe, it's 999 or 112, it depends. If you travel there, the number 911 should automatically translate, like 112 and 999 translate here. Okay, so here in Windsor, what and I don't know, sorry if it's a little bit blurry. What is a 911 call? There's a little bit of confusion sometimes about what is an emergency. It's immediate threat to life or property. Immediate, as in it's happening now. You're not watching someone that might do something, it's happening now. Calls for screams, smoke, glass breaking, impaired driver, something that's going to cause imminent threat to life or property. Not emergency calls is everything else. Right? Any questions on those? So, what if you accidentally dial 911? What if you didn't even know you dialed 911? Pocket dials and abandoned calls happen all the time. They happen because we put our phones in our purse. Guys carry them in their pocket. Technology changes. There's updates to your phone that you don't even know about that your provider has made changes to. So all we ask is that you stay on the line. So if you don't stay on the line and you have a registered cell phone, so any cell phone that has some sort of plan attached to it, not something where let me just backtrack a little bit. Any cell phone can dial 911 as long as it has a battery charge, even if you do not have a cell phone plan, a texting plan, a calling plan, anything. The problem with that though is then we don't get all of the information along with those calls if you don't have a registered plan. But we still have to follow up on them if there's a phone number associated to the phone, if that makes sense. Go ahead.
What happens if there is no phone number?
If there is no phone number and you've dialed 911, there's no way for us to contact you again. You have to stay on the line. So stay on the line. That's all we ask.
I had an incident, I had an iPhone, for the benefit of the people on Zoom. And I took the iPhone and not knowing which way it was, I turned it upside down and I put it in the cup holder in my golf cart. That depressed, because it's compressed, the two buttons on the side, which are the emergency call from my iPhone to the OPP. So 911, and I couldn't understand what that voice was. I kept saying, "Are you all still on the line?" And anyway, I just don't ever do that. Don't put your phone upside down in a golf cart.
So your golf game was that bad, you made
So thank you for that. That's a perfect segue, and that's exactly where I was going next. Pocket dials happen because there are quick buttons built in to the phone, but you can turn that off. So they auto enable those features, but not everybody wants to use them, right? So kind of brings me to the next slide.
Then there's this screen, when you go to shut your phone off, and if you're not paying attention and you hit the wrong red button.
Exactly.
Call the police.
Exactly. So know your device, know your technology and what it can do, because they auto enable these features and we wish they didn't. They wish they provided the education with your phone to say, do you want this? Because it's definitely a benefit for people that have a need for it. Maybe they saying I'm a lot. They have dexterity issues or vision issues. They can't quite see the numbers they want to dial, but it's easy for them. Or they know that they live in a situation where they may not want to have their phone out, but they can just squeeze the buttons, right? And get to us more quickly. Absolutely. Should we have those features enabled? Yes, but not for everybody. In June, Android users, anybody an Android user? I'm not an Android user,
Yeah.
but I know I'm one of those. My work phone's an Android, so I guess I do both. They turned on a lot of these features automatically, and people didn't know. We had an increase of 30% in our cell phone accidental dials just in Windsor. It was happening in Europe, all of North America. It was a huge problem because we can't plan for staffing that way. But the calls still come in and we have to follow up. So going back to the fact that I would like you to stay on the line. The reason for that is we follow up on every 911 call. So even if there's no voice, if there's a valid phone number, our people will call you back or try to call you back and confirm that there's not an emergency there. What we have found historically is 2%. So 0.2% of the abandoned calls are true, typically domestic related. So we don't want to dismiss them because somebody did need our help. It's all in the details. we ask a lot of questions, and sometimes that can be frustrating when you're dialing 911 because all you want is help. Just get it, just get help here, just get help here, just get help here. There's a lot of questions. Who, what, when, where, why, and weapons. That's what we want to know. And any associated information to those questions. Obviously, the first question we need to know answers to is, where are you? How many have cell phones? Everybody. I have 2. Some people have multiple cell phones in their house. It's a mobile society. Nobody's calling from a landline anymore. The landline's the one that gave us the most definitive location information, period. Cell phones, we can't assume that the GPS location is accurate. It's getting better. It's not perfect. So sometimes it's a 300-meter radius. So 300-meter radius based on the dot is 600 meters across. That's a big area, especially if you're downtown Windsor when there's, you know, tall buildings and things like that. If you're in the middle of a field, it's better. So we want to confirm. The best way to confirm where you are is for you to tell us. We want to know what's going on, what's happening. Are there weapons for a variety of reasons? The information is not just for us, but it's mostly for responding officers so that they know exactly what they're driving into. Do they drive faster? Do they not drive faster? How urgent is it? How many people are involved so that they can set up a perimeter, things like that. Any questions? So I don't know if this is going to work. I have a little bit of a video because now I want to kind of get into next generation 911. The video is from the CRTC. They are mandating changes for providers or PSAPs like us to kind of get with the times. Oh, it's not going to work. So I'm not going to play it. Just kidding. I might be able to find it if you want to bear with me, but basically what it says is technology is advanced to the point where we need to play catch up. There are shows like CSI, watches CSI, who watches the 911 show, the 911 movie with Halle Berry. Some of it's real, some of it's not. I mean, we're not going to go run down a rabbit hole to get a bad guy. That's not my job, right? Those things lead people to think that we can find you no matter how you provide us the information. So a lot of young kids these days use social media. So they're on social media and they're sharing their worst possible moment, whatever they're going to do or not do. I'm on social media with a friend, or I'm playing a video game with a friend. Can you find them? They say they're suicidal. Things like that. We can't just magically get that information from social media platforms, things like that. We need to know the information. But again, it goes back to the technology and public expectation. What can we do and where are we? So we are upgrading our 911 systems. So the city of Windsor, we are already ahead of the game. We have implemented our 911 next generation phone system. We're just waiting for the Bell network to be ready so that we can connect it. So the copper lines are the old 911 system, can accept any kind of information, pictures, videos, social media, telematics, any of those things. The new network will, because it's going to be internet based. It'll be based on fiber. So not copper lines, fiber. Does that make sense? So in 2025, they will disable the 911 network as you know it, the copper line system, and we are going to transition over. Not scary at all. No big deal. Flip the switch. I know when we flipped our switch, I was like, but we did it. It wasn't scary. We're still getting calls. We didn't drop any calls. Life is good. The other benefit of going to next generation 911 is we'll have resiliency, redundancy. If one system goes down, we have a backup system. All in the same place. We don't even necessarily have to leave the building, but we have a second building. So we kind of have 4 levels of redundancy. If it fails at headquarters, the second set of systems come up. If we have to leave headquarters because there's a situation at the building, we go to our backup site, and then we have double redundancy there. So that's kind of what it means for next generation 911. We're just progressing to be able to catch up with this technology that we have in our hands and our pockets. Yes.
Is the actual center in police headquarters?
The primary center, yes. Yeah, and our backup center is in another location in Windsor, which we don't share.
Don't tell the lawyer.
Well, we don't share it anyways.
And how many staff would be staffing the 911 center at one time?
So it depends on the shift. So we have 9 people on every platoon, including a supervisor. There isn't always 9 people working, and there's lunches and everything that we accommodate, so it kind of fluctuates, and it also depends on overlap. Friday nights, Saturday nights, what used to be considered our busy times, we would have a little bit more of a buffer in staff. It seems like it doesn't matter what time of day, what time of night, what day of the week it is, and it's busy.
Follow up on that, though, so if you have 9 people on staff and you get 10 phone calls at one time, what happens?
They wait.
North Bay.
No, not for Windsor. Yeah, so we do have, but assuming they're not gonna all be 911 calls, hopefully, unless there's an accident on the expressway, everyone with their cell phone calls. Right, so one of the other perks of our new phone system is we have 2 maps. We have a map that shows us where our people are and where the calls are. And we have the 911 map that shows us where every single 911 call that's coming in is. So if there's a cluster of calls on the expressway, for example, because everybody sees an accident, just want to know if you got it. I'm not saying don't call us. But also we want to see that there's one call way over here that's coming in. If that's someone having a heart attack or whatever the emergency might be, we want to cherry pick. We're gonna let some of these ones ring and we're gonna go to this one. So hopefully we solve that problem.
I've actually been put on hold. I'm calling 911, which is funny. It was in Windsor. But do you ever find that people don't call in? Like there was an accident on the 401, so clearly not your area.
That was North Therapy.
Yeah, but I wasn't put on hold for that one, but we called, we were stopped. And there was like at least 10 or 15 cars between us, maybe a couple trucks in there. And we're just sitting there and like you can see carnage on the side and like somebody's got called. And I'm like, we don't hear any sirens. We waited like 4 minutes, don't hear any sirens, we did 6 minutes. We started, my friend, as a nurse practitioner, we walked up, whole bunch of truck drivers watching, nobody called. I was like, it's been now 10 minutes since this accident's happened, no one's called 911. Does that happen in the city of Windsor ever? Like,
So I wouldn't know
It sure
that
doesn't
nobody
feel like it.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like it. Multiple duplicate calls,
okay,
but I would never tell someone if you see an accident, don't call. Because what if?
right, because I had to give all the details, because I've called before, and I thanks, we got that one. And I'm
Right.
okay. But this was like, no, I was on the phone for 10 minutes giving details of how many people, where are they? I was like, this is crazy. I've been sitting in my car for 10 minutes.
It goes back to how many questions we asked.
Yeah, it was a lot, so clearly I was the first person, but I wonder if is there training for new truck drivers who maybe are not born in Canada? Because these were all Indian truck drivers, so I'm just wondering if is there a system where they get trained?
So that I can't
You don't
answer that.
Not
I
maybe
mean-
through the police department.
No,
Okay.
we try to talk and explain. There's so much that people don't know. Again, it goes back to public expectation.
Yeah.
What do you know? I hope that you know what's an emergency, what's not an emergency, what we're gonna ask, when to call, when not to call.
Because I was trained as a little kid in school, like 45 years ago. They used to tell, we used to have the police would come in and tell us.
They do.
They still do it, okay.
So even we used to go, we have a safety village now, so a lot of
Yeah.
schools run through the safety village. We also used to run the 911 program through the safety village, so we would go speak on 911. Patrol, the officers, they don't necessarily know what we do. They know that we dispatch them, they know that piece, but they don't understand the 911
Side.
They do and they don't. They know what the public knows. They don't know what we know. So we try to share.
Tracy, does the 911 center keep track of the crimes that you have prevented essentially?
911 center doesn't. I know that the senior leadership, they keep track of the stats. I don't know if they can necessarily narrow it down to the crimes that we've prevented. But we have all kinds of stats. We live on stats. You're welcome. Sorry, who's that question? Oh, hi.
So you've done a really great job of delineating the reasons to call 911 or the reasons to just call the regular police number. How do the dispatchers handle it if someone calls to say there's a suspicious person on my street or in my neighborhood? Are you required to send police out, or do you sort of talk to the person about whether that's really an emergency situation?
So is it an emergency if they're just in the area? Not necessarily. The things that we would do is definitely broadcast it, try to send someone to the area for a suspicious person. We wouldn't necessarily keep you on the line. We would get the description, direction of travel, things like that. Or if you are someone, say we will keep you on the phone as long as you do see them, especially if they're going into a property or someone's yard and you know that they don't live there. We would do that. But we would broadcast and send someone in the area when available.
And
Some-
then that's
and
all-
sometimes they're not always available because we have multiple priorities and there's, you know, if you have 13 priority life or death emergencies, whether it's property or not, and all of the officers are on other emergencies, but it's a juggling act some days, try to get everyone out there.
Okay, and a follow-up question to that, if I may. So if someone is repeatedly calling 911 to report suspicious people in their neighborhood or whatever, and it's not proving to be an emergency, does anyone talk to them? Is there sort of a strategy or procedure around kind of educating people about how to properly use 911?
So we don't necessarily direct our conversations to direct certain people for, what is the word, our regular callers, let's say, or someone, or persistent callers. Because they don't take that positively, right? Like they're kind of already in a situation where they feel like they may not be getting help because they keep calling us for the same thing. So then I don't wanna go back to them and say, hey, stop calling us. We would never do that. 911 and non-emergency, we might say, just call us on the non-emergency line next time, unless you see them actually trying to access a car, someone's house, things like that. But I'm not gonna, I wouldn't promote that to our people.
Can you talk, Tracy, a little bit about Black Gigantic and how that, getting those videos, is that part of your presentation?
It isn't, but
And how that benefited and, you know, we're next generation.
for interoperability and next generation 911. Let me get to that near the end, but just remind me, because I have dementia, I won't remember. Did I answer your question?
You did.
Okay, were there any other questions before? So we already kind of touched on public expectation and reality, so just some ideas. It's not just cell phones that can call us anymore. Does anybody have a smartwatch? This one? Do you have, or the new Apple crash notification that's on your phone? Good times. Does anybody like roller coasters or drive really fast? Because, or if you're in your car and you hit your brakes really hard and your phone goes flying, guess what? Crash notification. It automatically calls us. Automatically calls. So again, know your technology. You can disable those things. If you're going on a roller coaster, I know we all love that. Just disable that. Because when you go down that hill really fast, it scares your Apple Watch. It does. It really scares it. So crash notifications, OnStar, they call us. The car, not the car itself, but the notification goes to OnStar, who then calls us. So
If they ask you, are you okay?
if they're talking to you in your car, or if you hit your brakes really fast and they think that you're in an accident, just answer them, because then they give us random information and we have to narrow it down and try to call you that way as well. Text with 911. Does anybody know that there is text with 911 in the city of Windsor and the town of Amherstburg? Really, all of Canada? So currently, text with 911 is for the deaf, the DHHSI community, so the deaf and hard of hearing, speech impaired society, and their family and friends. They don't always have a way to talk to us, so we don't allow them. They were provided with text with 911 in Canada, as opposed to in the States, everyone has text to 911. We want text with 911 because you still have to make a voice call, because we want all of the lovely information that comes with a voice call. When you dial 911 on your landline or on your cell phone, we get the phone number and we get GPS coordinates. On a landline, we get your exact location where that landline is. So with text with 911, we didn't want people just to text to 911. We wanted to get all of the magic that happens with a voice call. And that's how that's going to work. And then with next gen 911, it's not just going to be text with 911, it's going to be real-time text. So basically, you know how on an iPhone you see the 3 dots? It's not just going to be 3 dots. We're going to see what you're typing. So that if you have an emergency and you can only text to us, we'll see exactly what you started to put. So if it's part of your address or something, we want as much as we can get right out of the gate, and then we'll do our magic in the back end. Any questions? So this is our phone. It's a computer. So next generation 911, and I took this picture yesterday, so it's current. It's just a computer screen. If you were to come into any of our 911 centers, we don't have a desk phone anywhere anymore. Crazy, right? But it's working. Works magically. Okay, so I'm just gonna go back and I'm gonna touch on your question with interoperability. I just need a sip of something. And I did bring water. Okay, pardon me. It's okay, it's okay. So. Next generation 911 and interoperability. It is important for us to be able to talk to so much. Other agencies, other municipalities, other 911 centers, like that. So interoperability and cross-border interoperability is important. Why? Because we live in Windsor. Lots of things happen in Windsor along our borders, Convoy, for example. The Detroit International Marathon recently, we need communication on both sides of the borders. Excuse me, I'm just so sometimes explaining things isn't enough, right? So going to Lori's example of Lac Megantic, I use this a lot. Does anybody remember Lac Megantic, the train derailment and burned half the town? Yep. So one of the things that happened that day, aside from many things that happened that day, was no one really understood how big it was until someone sent a picture to the fire chief in town. So I heard this gentleman speak a couple of times, and basically the train derailed and everybody's like, oh, the town's on fire. He's like, it's not on fire, right? Sends a picture. Oh my gosh, the entire town's on fire. So then he fires the email off, the pictures off to everyone else. Pictures worth 1,000 words. What that did was get everybody to come. So being close to the border and how many days that event took, people from the States came over to help, people from different provinces came to help, French-speaking community didn't speak English. And the people that came to help didn't necessarily speak French. So there's a problem, there's a barrier. So how do you solve that problem? The technology on both sides of the border, the couplings. Is it couplings or couplings on a truck? I don't know, that where the hoses connect.
Coupling thing.
The US used one different threading. Canada used a different. How do you solve that problem? So those kinds of things and interoperability were issues that had to be resolved. What am I missing? There's so much about that presentation. And it's just about figuring out how to work together and solve those problems in advance. NG911 is about sharing the images and sharing the data, the videos, all of those things so that everybody has an understanding. That's coming. That's post 2025. When we cut over to the EZINet, so it's the Emergency Services IP network, just for 911, that's the fiber, that's the new cable network. It will allow us to have photos, videos, telematics, health information. So whatever you provide, so you know how you sign your life away, you scroll through those agreements. Yes, I agree to 911, agree. In there, you give away your right to privacy in Canada. When you dial 911, we know who you are, essentially. We can call the provider and say, who owns this phone number? You do, right? Because we assume you need our help and you want us to have that information. But as we progress to NG, there are other things that you're going to give away. Apple iPhone, if you share your health information, you can choose to, or you can choose not to, what you give. But if you are someone that say has health issues or heart issues or any of those things, and you want ambulance to have that information sooner than later, you can share it. We'll get it. But those are kind of the examples of where it's going. Again, that's going to be post 2025. 2025, it's going to be for voice and real-time text. That's what we're starting with. That's what we want to make sure everything works. And then beyond that, we'll add a little bit every other time. I'll probably still be here till it's all implemented. I think I have 10 more years or something. So hopefully, I mean, I like new things. I like technology. And I want to make sure that this works for everybody. So I think that's all that I had to add. Does anyone else have any other questions?
Have you or any of your staff had any cryptic 911 calls where somebody has somebody, let's say Ilias beside me, and I don't want him to know I'm actually calling for assistance, but the operator, either my voice or.
Yeah, sometimes we call it our spidey senses. there's just something that's off with the call and we're like, oh, I knew I should have put that call in when the officers get there and there's an arrest made or whatever the situation might be. There is no magic word, you know, like I'm asking for a pizza. I see that on social media all the time. There is no, we ask questions and that's part of the question list is to keep asking questions to see, okay, is there a problem here? Is there not a problem here? Are you playing a game with us? We get a lot of, I should say we get some younger members of society trying to test us or laugh at us or you can't find me. Oh, yes, we can. Yes, we can. So we do everything we can to figure it out. And most times we get, you know, hit the button on your phone if you're having a problem. Things like that. There are things we try to do to mitigate that.
But as you can imagine, it's very time intensive. So just to search out one person. So we've had calls where somebody's suicidal on, say, like on a game. It's just somebody I play a game with. Well, trying to find that, it could take a person 2 hours. So that when you look at how many communicators they have working at any given time, you're taking one completely out of the mix, just working on that. So, and when you see that there's a call every 30 seconds, that really can impact the entire center.
Are there a lot of mental health issues with 911 calls?
Yes. I don't. People are in crisis in all kinds of different ways. So it depends on what the crisis is. Sometimes we will defer them to other resources. So the hospital has a suicidal hotline. We can defer some people to that. Sometimes we just need to send help based on whatever the circumstances are. I know I've taken calls where the other thing I want to touch on is if you are going to the US and you have your cell phone and you dial 911, don't assume they can find you. It's even more complicated to try to find a Canadian cell phone in America than an American cell phone in Canada. And how many of us have family members that work on either side of the border? Always be able to express that to your family that they are nurses in the States or anyone that works in the US. If you have an emergency and you dial 911, you better be able to say where you are because it takes not that we can't find you, it just takes longer if we have to do something in the back end.
So if I was a nurse and I worked at Belmont and I called 911 when I was in the parking lot there, would you be answering?
No.
The US would answer.
The US would answer. So it's when we went to 10-digit dialing, that kind of helped eliminate which tower is it going to take along the border. But it does typically route within the jurisdiction that you're at. There are times because you're close to the water that it does bounce across. We during fireworks events, we'll get calls for shots fired and we're like, oh my gosh. And they're like, you hear the accent and you're like, are you in America? Oh my goodness. You know, so there are times when it crosses. I can't really speak to why that happens. I mean, frequencies and all those things, that's way beyond me.
Can you share with us the most frightening call you personally have ever taken? And then conversely, the most regarding.
So the call that I liked the most was on Christmas Eve. I had a little boy dial 911 because his dad was going to take all of his presents away and put a hole in there because he was caught opening his Christmas presents early and rewrapping them. Favorite call ever.
How many cars did you send over?
I talked to Dad. I love that call. I wish I kept a copy. There are other calls that have rocked my world. You know, we've all taken calls that impact us crazy, and I might get emotional because I think about one every time. But it's the job we do. I love my job, but we're here when on people's worst days. So just know that we just want to help. We ask, like I said, we ask a lot of questions. We don't always get it right. Sometimes we are going call to call, or multiple calls are stacked in our queue. I don't even have the phone up there now. This can just be full some days. 911, non-emergency calls, internal calls, they all sit there. We see it, but we get the 911 calls first. Sometimes you just wait for the non-emergency calls. If you were in another jurisdiction like Toronto, the non-emergency calls and even to dispatch calls can wait days. We can typically get things out within a day, just depends. If we've had a shooting or a murder, or it just depends. And when we say you're the next call in the area, if a priority comes in, they go first. And you would want that first for your family. You know, so it's really hard to quantify how fast we can get help to you, but in an emergency situation, we do everything we can.
Jeffrey, what training do you go through to get new operators up to speed? And secondly, talk about stress of the operators and how they're dealing with it.
So our communicators get 5 weeks of in-class training. We have a group, that's where I'm going right after this. 5 weeks of in-class training, and then they're assigned for 5 weeks with a trainer. And then, so 20, they shadow, job shadow, so 10-hour shifts, multiple shifts a week for 5 weeks. And then they get observation. So we'll monitor, do they need a little extra training? Are they making it? Is there something that we need to help? But really, they're not going to be comfortable for 1 to 3 years doing the job. And they start as call takers. We've had it where we've tried to do call taking and dispatching, you know, one day they call take, the next day they dispatch. That's how we train them. There are benefits and positives and negatives to doing it both ways. Right now, we're back to doing just call taking. And then once they master that, they will move to the dispatching side. As far as wellness goes, lots of things. We have wellness within the center. We have peer counselors. We have an on-staff psychologist. They're now bringing the dogs through for wellness. The room just changes when the pets are there. I wish I could just bring mine. But we do everything we can. And like I said, we all have calls. Some of us handle it differently. Some of us, you know, I've been giving talks many times, and suddenly I'm a puddle for no random reason. Doesn't matter. Doesn't mean I won't do it the same call next time. I still answer calls occasionally. Last week I was on the phone, so it's crazy. Sorry, I'm a little rusty.
You mentioned that the non-emergency calls come up on that list.
Everything comes up here.
So if a non-emergency call comes in and you're not answering it, does it just pop up and call back later? How does that work? What do you mean?
That's a good question.
Sit there on the list.
So that's a good question. So we have what's called automated call distribution, or an ACD. So basically we have the system programmed to prioritize calls. So 911 calls will always, so they drop in our ear. We don't choose which calls to answer. So the first call in, highest priority, goes to the first available call taker. So longest waiting goes to the longest idle. And then they drop. And then non-emergency are the next priority, internal calls. So if officers or someone within the building is trying to reach us, they're at the bottom. Sorry, they get the bottom. One of the things to add about this new phone system and the fact that it's IP, your phone, if we're not on the phone, if we're not already on a call, you might not even hear a ring. You'll just hear us saying, "Hi, police fire ambulance, how can we help you?" It's that fast. And I know the funny story is when we transitioned this, some of our officers would dial up. They're like, sometimes they're having conversations and didn't know that we were listening already. They're like, "Oh, I didn't, you know, how dare you be listening to my conversation? Phone didn't ring." I'm like, how efficient are we that our phone didn't even ring and we're already there? Right? Does anybody else have any questions?
I'm just wondering about your educational background. The only reason I say that is that I have a close friend of mine whose daughter works for EMS, like emergency in Toronto. She's a nurse background by profession. And assisted 3 live births, coaching dads. They got stuck on the 401.
So what we require, post-secondary education is recommended. It's not required. There is no degree that you can take to necessarily do this job. I have a degree in sociology and criminology. Didn't help me with this necessarily. The fact that I had one on my resume, maybe it helped them look at my resume, but it didn't make me better at this job. We train on site. I know that we've had applicants that have taken communication, 911 emergency telecommunicators course. They don't necessarily do it better than other people. What we like to see is multitasking, your ability to think on your feet. What else? It's so, yeah. And what is the magic sauce? If we knew, oh my gosh, we have such a hard time hiring and keeping people. So sometimes people are great in the classroom and then they get into the center and they're like, this isn't for me. I didn't realize that, humanity was It was harsh, right? Some things, sometimes reality slaps you in the face when you do what we do. The community lives in a bubble. I had no idea what really happened within the city sometimes.
But we also need basic skills that aren't necessarily pushed in school like they once were. Like in
40
schools,
words per
it's like, okay, well, spelling doesn't really matter because a computer will always correct it. Well, that's not true in our system. So if somebody doesn't know how to spell street names in Windsor, and you're the person calling in, you're saying, I'm on Olette, and they're like, oh. What, and they're taking their time, and that person needs you there right away. We need people who can spell. We need people who can type really fast because the average talker is at 120 words a minute. And if you're doing the hunt and peck, that's not going to be quick enough in an emergency. So and really basic English skills, that ability to take a lot of information and put it down into concise bits for the person dispatching the call, the ability to get all of the information that you need to really good memory skills, things like that, concentration, focus. Those are the kinds of things that we really need.
And the other thing, just to touch on that, is we live in a very diverse community, and English is not everyone's first language. We have language services. So if there is someone who speaks another language, we don't have every language within our center. We are becoming more diverse, where we have a lot of languages that have been added with our communicators. But if they're on another call or they're on a day off, we still need some way to translate for certain people. We have language services that we use, and our officers also use language services to help mitigate that. I mean, I don't speak multiple languages, but I help multiple languages. That's it.
Wow.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for coming. Our club loves interaction, and this was a great discussion.
I just don't even know what to say. It's informative.
Like, wow, I know that I could never do the job because first of all, I would be too emotional. I wouldn't be able to stay calm or patient. Plus, like, I would be like, no, like, I just couldn't do it.
I can vouch for that.
It is difficult, and part of the problem with being a 911 communicator is I want the information and I want it when I want it. I go home and my kids are trying to tell me a story. I'm like, no, I don't need the details. Just tell me. And they're like, Mom, just let me finish. So it's helpful in my work environment and also helpful in my